What's going on, everyone? Welcome back to Racially Speaking. This is David Phipps, your host, and I'm joined by my friend. This person's amazing. I'm glad that we're finally working it out that we could have her on the podcast. I'm joined by Victoria, aka Very Vicky on all her social media. Victoria Willis. Look, Victoria. All right, is it Vicky or Victoria? What do you want me to call you throughout this episode?
Vicky's good.
Okay, Vicky, that's what I thought.
Yeah.
Very Vicky, that's one of the most solid handles on social media, I might add.
Thank you. It started in high school.
Nice. Yeah, Caitlin and I talk sometimes about the awkwardness of screen names and stuff like that. But anyway, yours isn't awkward. Yours is awesome.
I feel like I had more awkward ones before, and then senior year of high school, I was like, this needs to change. It needs to be kind of better than this.
No, love it. But all right, look, before we jump into this, we just want to keep it real here on Racially Speaking. Listeners, we are re-recording this episode. We sat down. I thought I had an amazing episode. We recorded this last week. We even had John Mark swoop in halfway through mid podcast, had him contribute some. So that was a fun experience to have somebody come in mid episode. We'd never done that before. And at the end, had some technical difficulty and didn't have all the audio recorded. So anyway, full disclosure, we are re-recording this, but I know we're gonna kill it again. By we, I mean Vicky, you killed it last time. I was really honestly just bummed that we didn't have all that material recorded. Because as our listeners will see by the end of this, you are a wealth of knowledge and a very, very valuable voice to what we're going to talk about today. So thank you for coming on again, listeners. So there's the backdrop a little bit too. If we, sound like, okay, where do we want to go here? Because this is what we did last time. If it feels like that, that's kind of what we're navigating, but we're going to be as natural as possible. Does that sound good, Vicky?
Yeah, it's going to be good. It's going to be hopefully better than last time. So
yeah, I mean, it was good last time.
We got this.
Yeah, you did great last time. But I guess it can only improve. I don't think we're going to get worse. Anyway, all right, Vicky, again, tell our listeners a little bit about yourself, who you are vocationally, culturally. Talk a little bit about your family, whatever. Take that however you want.
Okay. So on the first time we recorded this, I really liked that I opened up with I'm a Christian, and I love that we pray before every episode, because without that and without God, then I wouldn't have the rest of it. So I am an art teacher. I'm an elementary art teacher. I teach K through 6. So I have little more than 600 kids. I'm the only art teacher in my school, so I get to watch my little kiddos grow from kindergarten all the way up to 6th grade. I'm one of the only specials at our school, that gets to do that. I like to think I know these kids a lot better because I see them year after year, and I see the progression and the growth that they've made throughout the years. I'm also a new mom, a wife. I identify as Filipino and Chinese. Mainly Filipino. My dad is half and half, so we have a little bit of Chinese culture in our households, more like food and celebrating Lunar New Year, but not too much on that end. It's more so our Filipino background that we really celebrate.
That's awesome. So your dad's half Chinese, half Filipino, and your mom's Filipino?
Yes.
Gotcha. That's awesome. So I think I said this last time, but when I had you on, I was pretty sure you're Filipino, but I wanted to ask you while we were recording, but I didn't expect to be Filipino and Chinese, so that's great.
Yeah, we even have little nicknames. So every person in our family has a nickname, and my youngest sister, hers is in Chinese because we have big sister, little sister, but there's not a littlest sister in Tagalog. So we have little sister in Chinese, which is Shobe for her.
Okay. Wow, that's great.
Yeah.
So are you in the middle? Do you have an older sister and a younger sister?
I have so many sisters.
Oh, wow. Okay.
I come from I have a very blended family. On my dad's side, I'm the oldest, and then I have a brother and then two younger sisters. And then on my
Okay.
mom's side, I have an older brother, a stepsister, and then two more sisters. And we technically adopted my cousin when he was a teenager, so he's kind of
Okay.
in there too.
Wow. All
Yeah,
right. So you
very
got a
blended.
yeah blended crazy household.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah, that's awesome. So okay, so you said you mostly identify with your Filipino culture, but um, so we'll go with that. So what would you say is I think when I wrote the question I said mainstay, but what would you say is the biggest cultural aspect you identify with, or sorry, the biggest I think mainstay is still the right word, but prominent thing about your culture that you would want people to understand.
I love this question. I would say probably hospitality and food. And
Mm,
um, I saw something today that um, someone was talking about community in the Filipino culture, and I think that really goes into the hospitality as well, because we all work as a family, even our friends and family, like everyone worked together. We also welcome everyone into our household, and even homes that don't have much, they're always willing to give, especially through food. So you never go into a Filipino's house without a full belly or without having access to their fridge. My friends and my sisters come into my house and raid my fridge all the
yeah,
time.
that's awesome.
So our culture is really based around hospitality and food and sharing in the community.
That's great. Yeah, I would echo that. The I guess adjacency or acquaintances that I grew up around who were Filipino, it wasn't even from going to their houses necessarily, but it was just I picked up on that culturally. I ended up working in a couple of restaurants where there was a lot of Filipino people I worked with, and then my mom at her one of her jobs when I was growing up, she had a lot of Filipino people working with her, and they would honestly they would send home food with her a lot of times to bring home. So I grew
Yeah.
up to love that, and just the demeanor and personalities of the people I worked with at restaurants were always just very, very hospitable. That's what I even would have guessed if you asked me what kind of stuck out about Filipino culture. I'm just like, man, I feel like I'm family with you guys, and I don't really even know you guys, but this is cool. This is awesome.
Yeah, and now that we're talking about this again, I'm realizing that even my stepmom and my dad, whenever they get new neighbors in, they're always sending food over, even though they don't know
Mm,
them. So I remember one time, I think like 2 or 3 summers ago, they were packing up food, and I was like, "Who's that going to? We're all here." And they're like, "Oh, we have neighbors that we haven't met yet, or they just moved in. We want to make sure that they have food too, because what if they don't have their groceries yet? What if they don't have this
yeah,
yet? So we want to make sure that they are taken care of."
that's great.
I also read
So,
recently that, oh, go ahead.
no, yeah, go
Oh,
for it.
I also read recently that Filipino recipes are made for like 6 to 8 people. And when I read that, I realized that even when I cook way more, it's only my husband and I, but I always cook way more than I need. And I think it's
Mm,
because of that. I'm so used to seeing like a big pot of something or a big dish of something because it's meant to share for more than just us.
yeah, so did you find yourself like doubling and tripling, like not even Filipino food, but like cookies and and
Yeah, for
stuff?
no reason. Like, I know I'm not gonna eat 3 dozen cookies, but what if
That's
someone wants
awesome.
them at school?
I was gonna say, yeah, do you bring stuff into to work?
Sometimes the county that I work for is really against like sharing food, and so like our
What I was gonna
students see
say.
us all the time. Yeah, and
Yeah.
I'm a specialist, so I'm not always tied to my room. I mean, yes, I am, but I have a couple minutes to run down the hall real fast every once in a while. And so I feel like the kids are always seeing me interact with other teachers. So if I'm like, "Hey, I brought you this," they'd be like, "Oh, we can share food too." And so I don't really share too much or bring too much to school,
Gotcha.
but I
Gotcha.
wish I could.
Yeah. Right. I was gonna say, I'm sure
Allergies and
there's
stuff.
yeah, and a bunch of restrictions nowadays with, I guess
Yeah.
even COVID probably affected that a little bit.
Yeah, definitely. Like classroom parties and things. Everything has
Yeah,
to be store bought and wrapped up individually.
yeah, man, bummer. Um, awesome. Well, I appreciate you sharing all that. On the other side of things, what's something that you think is most misunderstood or unknown about Filipino culture?
Um, when we talked about this last time, we talked about how whenever people visit the Philippines, they see really big cities or really nice resorts or like night just like the Instagram worthy spots and places of the Philippines, but we don't realize that as you like leave the bigger cities that it is a third world country and you see a lot of huts and shacks and small villages here and there um, that people live in. And I was talking to my stepdad about this a couple days ago because they had gone to the Philippines recently, and
Mm,
he was also shocked that the second, not really the second, but very soon after you leave a big city, you're all you see is like openness or a lot of wilderness, and then you see like random little huts here and there. And that's something that really humbled him, he said.
yeah, yeah, it's great. Yeah, I
And so like
mentioned. Go ahead.
so when we went, we island hopped, and it seemed like it was like a super extravagant thing, but it like, I mean, it was nice to island hop, but we weren't on like this really big like cruise ship or anything. It was like a little tiny boat, and then we just like went from island to island. It wasn't like anything extravagant.
Right. Yeah, I think even when you say, I think I made this joke last time, but even when you say island hopping, that's probably
Yeah.
speaks to American culture and our ignorance on not understanding. Like my question was, what do you think is most misunderstood? I think that's right on point with, I hear island hopping, I'm like, oh yeah, resort and vacation and
Yeah.
everything's great, but to not understand the third world conditions is a great,
Hmm.
some good information for people to hear about. That's cool that you got to chop it up with your stepdad in between having to re-record.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Um. All right. Well, as you mentioned, you're a specialist. You're an elementary art teacher. Did you say you have 600 students?
Just about. Yeah. If not
Okay.
a
I
few
don't know if you
more.
mentioned that last time. Man,
Yeah.
that that is bonkers.
It's a lot.
600.
And
Wow.
then I always
Yeah.
get the do you know all of their names question.
Yeah. Go
Um
ahead.
the
Go. Let's hear him. Let's hear him.
the answer no. The answer is I know like 98% of them.
Okay.
I don't have pre-K. So they're not counted in that 600. But kindergarten, even towards the end of the year, I'm still a little iffy with because I see them once a week and all of their little faces and all their different energies, and they're changing so fast throughout that year. I
Mm-hmm.
do mix up the kindergartners, but by first grade, I know them, and first grade through like sixth grade, like 100% know all of them.
Yeah.
But I would say I do get my kindergartners a little mixed up, but I do know them a lot. I do know a lot of them by name.
Yeah. I mean, no judgment from me. That is incredibly impressive. If you are confidently saying 98%, I mean, anywhere near that that's a lot. That's a lot.
Yeah, so in the mornings we have duty at school, and my duty is to like stand outside my classroom because my classroom is kind of in the middle of our building, and so I just greet everyone as they come up the stairs. And other teachers around me are always like, "Wow, you know literally all of their names," because I'll address them by name and say, "Good morning, so and so. How are you, so and so? Did you eat breakfast, so and so?" And they're like, "We can listen to you all day. Say their names over and
Right. Yeah.
over."
Um okay, well, look, racially speaking, which, I love that we can dive into this here. What does it mean to you to be an Asian woman in the classroom? And do you think it's a big deal?
100% it's a big deal. When I got hired at my school, I thought I was going to be the only Asian teacher there just because, like, generally you see a lot of white women who are teachers and you
Mm,
don't see very many minorities. And so I was expecting to be the only Asian teacher. Thankfully, I'm not. We have about three or four other teachers who are of Asian culture background. So that's really cool. I would say that being an Asian teacher is very empowering and very heavy at the same time. Um, it's empowering because I get to show, especially the students who look like me and come from similar backgrounds as me, and especially the girls who look like me and come from similar backgrounds as me. They get to look at me and say, "Oh, Mrs. Willis was able to do this." It's not only these types of people who are able to be teachers or able to do this. If she can do it, then I can do it. Um, and I get to be a representation of my culture, of my background, of how I grew up. I share a lot of my background with my students because I want them to be able to relate to me. So they know that I have divorced parents. They know I have a lot of half siblings. They know that we are a very blended family. They know I'm from the Philippines. They know a lot of my background because I want them to be able to relate to me. And I think that's very empowering for them because they can see that, oh, I have divorced parents, but that didn't stop Mrs. Willis from being what she wanted to be, you know? So
mm,
it gives them motivation or inspiration that they can also do whatever their hearts desire, whatever makes them happy, whatever dreams they want to make come true. But it's also very heavy. And I think it's heavy because um, I feel like a lot of people look up to me or they're like watching me, not because they are like I'm under a microscope, you know, but they're seeing me as I'm different. I'm a minority. How is she going to react in the situation? So I can learn from that. And I don't think everyone has that feeling or has that responsibility. Um, and even if I wasn't a minority, of course I would stand up for diversity, inclusion, all of those things, equity, equality, all of those. But especially because I'm a minority in a classroom, uh, I feel like that is a big responsibility that I need to uphold and really just like take in, you know?
hmm. Yeah, definitely. I appreciate you sharing all that. So even the wording and nature of my question saying, is it a big deal? Hopefully, listeners, you know that I would assume it's a big deal, but and I know you too would, or you also would, Vicky, but even asking that, I asked that because I feel like nowadays it can be easy to either over romanticize that, oh my gosh, a person of color is like, as a teacher in the classroom, this is amazing, and like it is, but I think some on one end might push back and be like, we shouldn't make such a big deal out of it because it takes away from it, which I see that point sometimes. But also I think
Yeah.
that it can be easy just to think that, well, is it really, that big a deal? And I'd wonder if you could even explain more, because first time recording, I love the examples you gave, because I feel like the things you've regularly found yourself dealing with your students has been even honestly surprising to me, because I was honestly surprised at how often you get to share your story, as you've talked about already a little bit, and gotten to literally talk about race and culture and essentially off the cuff kind of teach that stuff on the spot, and how that has been impactful. So I'd wonder if you could share some of those, or at least one example of how that comes up for you regularly and why it actually like is impacting your students daily, really. And it's not just a lighthearted, no, yeah, I get to be up here, so all this stuff is automatically happening because we just magically say it's happening. But no, it's actually like, because you are who you are, you're getting to be a part of these conversations.
Mm-hmm. Um, so what a story that I didn't tell the first time we recorded was my very first day of teaching at this school, he was in fourth grade at the time, and he looked at me and he goes, "Are you Filipino?" And I said, "Yeah." And he like jumped up and down and walked into my classroom and was like, "I'm not the only Filipino in the room anymore." And he was so
Mm,
happy to find out that I was Filipino and that we had that similarity. And he didn't feel
yeah.
like alone anymore. And I thought that was so cool. I think about that a lot.
Yeah,
But
that's
back,
amazing.
yeah. But I feel like, okay, how do I put this into words? It's a huge deal because I feel like not every teacher has this weight that they have to carry when it comes to race, when it comes to standing up for diversity. A lot of teachers are afraid to bring it up in classrooms or to talk about it because they don't want to come off some sort of way. They don't want to offend other students. But I feel like as a person of color and an Asian woman in a classroom, a lot of the times I can't just let those things slide. Even today, something happened race related. It was in second grade. And I don't know why this is a thing right now, but a lot of kids like to roast each other for funsies. And one of the
Hmm.
kids said something like, well, your skin is darker than mine. And then the other kid was like, wait, that's not funny anymore. Like, why does that matter? Because they were like talking about their hair color, their eye color. Well, you like this, well, you like that, like roasting each other. And it was playful up until he said, well, you have darker skin than me.
Hmm.
And everyone's faces were like, wait, what? And then I heard it and I thought they were going to shake it off. And then they didn't. And they kept saying, well, you're lighter than me, so what? Well, you're darker than me, so what? Well, you can't do this because you're darker than me. And then everyone started getting quiet. And then I had to pull them aside and we had to talk about it together. At school, we do something called a peace path. And so that gives each person who has a problem an opportunity to speak what's on their mind and to speak about what hurt them or what offended them. And so we did a little peace path so they can both understand each other. And towards the end, they can decide whether or not they are ready to move on or they have a minute or they need a minute to process what's happening. And then they can revisit the conversation later. So we had to do that. And they said that they were just roasting each other. But we talked about how that shouldn't be a roast. Like, that's not an okay conversation to have with each other. Those aren't nice things to say. Um, you can hurt each other's feelings, and we don't want the color of our skin to be a reason why someone can or cannot do something. Um,
Yeah.
and in second grade, I was very taken back because, like the last time we recorded, I talked about my sixth graders, and how almost every
Right.
single week I see my students once a week for an hour, and this specific class, almost every single week, we have to pause our teaching conversations or like project conversations to talk about why we can't say like why certain words are racial slurs, why things are offensive to others, why we have to understand and empathize with each other and not purposely try to hurt each other's feelings. And even if it wasn't on purpose, we have to learn why this was harmful to someone else so we can understand them and not do it again. Right. So, oh. Sixth grade's tough in elementary school. I feel like we have really deep
Right.
conversations, and it's not like we're pausing everything that we're doing. We're working on our projects while we talk about this a lot of the times, but it's almost every single week with this class. It's someone's calling so and so this, and every time like we have to talk about race again, and then you feel like you hear a couple people say, seriously, again, we have to do this again. Like, I mean, if you're
Yeah.
going to talk about it so much and you're going to bounce off the room like all all of class, then yes, we have to have this conversation because we're clearly not learning why this is a problem. Like, as Asians, we don't like when people say that we have slanted eyes. And some people don't
Mm.
understand why that is harmful or why that's offensive. So we have to have conversations like that with other cultures, other races, just so it's out in the open and we're understanding where people are coming from.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, I have so many questions. I'm glad we're recording.
So much.
That was yeah, that example is poignant. Uh, okay, so are students more often like what is the percentage would you say on stuff coming up from students interacting like this? Like the conversation you said was happening with students saying you can't do something because of their skin being darker, which I will come back to, but versus the percentage of you bringing it up as like as part of a lesson. I don't know. Like and I'm not in the classroom as a teacher at secondary level, but like I just can't imagine this is happening this often as you're saying it does to you. I'm not saying it's not happening to you, but I'm saying like this I don't know. I just can't maybe it's where I live obviously it's different culturally, but that
But you also
honestly
have a
it
diverse group
surprises
of
me.
students too. You have
What's
a
that?
diverse group of students too, though, right? You're at the college.
Well, college,
Yeah,
and I'm
yeah.
thinking about it through that lens, but also the yeah, I've two or one elementary schooler, and yeah, I don't know. That's wild to me that that's happening so much. I don't know why. I don't know why I'm surprised or if I should or should not be, but yeah.
I I almost never bring it up. I never, aside from like Black History Month lessons or AAPI lessons, where we're specifically talking about a specific culture and some of their backgrounds, I 99, 100% never bring it up point blank. It's always students talking about it themselves within each other, and I try not to overstep until I hear or see that it becomes a problem and they can't work it out together. When they can't work it out on their own and they're not able to empathize and sympathize with one another, that's when I step in. Um, because I know some parents don't want me having that conversation. It's a very like gray area as a teacher
Hmm.
because you don't want to overstep. You feel like it's not always your job. And then even as a minority, I don't feel like having these conversations nonstop is my job. It's not my job to teach this. My job is to teach art. But I we we are teaching and raising the next generation and we want this generation to understand and empathize one another. So I do feel like it's very important to talk about these things. And going back to your original question about um, what's it like being an Asian teacher and is it a big deal? I feel like this is not everyone's burden that they have to carry, which is why it's so heavy. Um,
Mm.
so yes, I don't bring it up very often. It's them, and a lot of the times I do think it's just the climate and the culture that we're living in right now. Like all of the 2020 things, like all of these kids lived through that, so they know
Right.
everything is rational, like how radical things can be, how polarized race can be. Um, and sometimes they like to pick and poke at each other and they bring it up and we have to, it's not something to pick and poke about.
Yeah, how so I had not heard about the roasting culture, but
I don't know. It's
so
awful.
yeah, how let me think. I mean, so is it encouraging or discouraging to that this stuff is coming up? So like hearing I don't know if you can be any more specific, but hearing the students literally talking about race in that way, like literally skin color correlating to what someone can or cannot do. I mean, is any part of it encouraging because it's out there and then you get to talk about it, or is it concerning that that is coming out of kids at such a young age in 2024?
Both. Um, it's very encouraging that we can talk about it and have decent conversations. Like in first and second grade, obviously these conversations are going to be a little different than sixth grade, but at least we can have that conversation, you know? Um, it's really discouraging because like 2022, why? Why does it matter what color your skin is? And why would that change whatever you can or cannot do, or someone's opinion about you, or how someone thinks of you? Um, why are we making these assumptions, you know? I feel like
Yeah,
we should move on from this, but here we are.
that is really, really interesting. Um, all right, yeah. Last thing on that, I gotta ask because when you're saying like roasting, you even mentioned racial slurs. So, what is like the level of offensiveness in elementary school kids? Like, are actual racial slurs being used, or is it just like I'm trying to think of something less or a little more lighthearted? I can't off the top of my head, or is it just talking about? I don't know. I think I feel like talking about skin color could be a little more lighthearted than actually saying a racial slur. Like
Right.
I don't know how explicit does it get?
We last recording we talked about how sixth grade does not belong in elementary school. My county does
Yes.
have sixth grade in elementary school, and one of the reasons they should not be is because they're exposed to so much. And I bring all of this up because it gets very explicit. So they're saying really unkind words, like some of my sixth grade classes are like throwing left and right the N word, and we
Mm.
can't have this. Like, I laugh because we all know that we're not supposed to say hurtful things like that or words like that or any sort of racial slur, especially at school. Like what you do
Mm-hmm.
outside of this building, none of my business. But when you bring it
Mm-hmm.
into my classroom, then we have to have a conversation about it because there's a time and a place, and there are feelings. Like we just shouldn't. We just shouldn't.
Is it we can move off this. Is it
Yeah, no, it's okay.
um because I feel like it can be this came up on the last episode John Mark and I did in a much different way, obviously. But is it white kids saying the N word to their black classmates, or is it I don't know, two black students? Because contextually that would be very different.
It would be different,
Obviously,
right? Um,
yeah,
so it's never the white kids saying it to the black kids, but when we talk about like black kids saying it to other black kids, I also correct that as well because we don't want that I don't want that said in my classroom either because other kids who may not understand repeat it,
yeah,
right?
mm-hmm.
I just don't think it's a word that is appropriate for school, and I think parents should have conversations with their kids about like the history of that word and how to use it,
Sure,
and if they do decide to use it. I don't think that's my place. um, but also the demographics of my class or of my school is very diverse, so we have a lot of dark skinned kids who may not be or identify as black, right? um,
right,
so some of them are starting to say it to other black kids, and then they're getting upset because they're like, well, you're not black, but my skin color
yeah,
is darker, so
mm-hmm.
that's like a whole nother level of like trying to figure out who's allowed to say this, who's not, why is this offensive with
Sure.
you say it,
I
but
mean,
why
we
is it
adults,
not?
yeah, adults don't even know how to.
It's confusing.
We haven't figured it
Right?
out either. But
It can be really confusing, especially in sixth grade. How old are you? Like 12? Um,
mm,
and you're taking on these big grown-up conversations within like 12-year-olds, like they're having them with each other, and then I have to step in and try to navigate this so they all understand um, what is inappropriate and what's not. And on
right,
top of that, I also have to navigate, well, I am not parent, I am teacher, and then where's that boundary? What does that line look like?
sure, sure. Just to be clear, I said we haven't figured that out. I do not, listeners. I did not mean we. That I'm trying to figure out how to or to not use that word. I don't
Right.
have any issues wondering my place there. Just saying that this same conversation repeatedly comes up even into
With
adulthood.
adults. Yeah.
Yes, far too often. But I mean, I know it doesn't sound like the most fun part of your job, Vicky, but I'm glad you're there to do it. Just, I mean, you
Thank
hearing
you.
these stories answers my question in and of itself when I ask, is it a big deal that you're there? I think what I'll continue to do after this ends is look for jobs and send them your way to have you guys come back down to good old Southwest Virginia, and so you can be down here in time to have my kids in the
No.
classroom. But all right, look, I got a question from. I told John Mark we were re-recording. He was bummed he couldn't make it, but he told me to ask you how you see race and culture and ethnicity come through in the art part of your job through your students. How do you see their culture and race or ethnicity come through?
Oh, I love this. Um, so in two different ways. So curriculum wise, every grade has a different theme. And third grade's theme is culture. So every project that I plan and create for them, I either choose a culture and we dive in and learn about it and explore and then create something by that through that, or I give them guidelines and they're allowed to use their background, their culture to create whatever my guidelines are. So let's say we are making a collage, and you need a color that represents something in your culture, a food, an article of clothing, things like that. They get to choose their culture, whether it's their actual culture or a culture that they really like, and they can create that way through that way. And you see the different cultures and ethnicities and backgrounds through that. Um, I am also not the teacher who says, this is what my pretty picture looks like. You have to make it exactly like mine.
Mm,
I tell my students that here is my example. You are not allowed to copy it. You can use some concepts that are similar, but not exactly the same. And you have to make it your own. And so usually when I open that gate of make it your own, you see a lot of things like I chose red because there's red in my Chinese flag and I'm Chinese, or I'm using this mandala because um, I'm Indian and I see these patterns on a lot of different things, or I'm using a lot of lights because of whatever culture uses a lot of light, things like that. Um,
yeah.
so I love being able to be so open and open to interpretation for them because they get to show who they are through their art and show what's important to them and what's important about their culture into their artwork. And I think parents really appreciate that too.
Yeah. Wow, that's awesome. That's awesome. Man, again, you seem like an amazing art teacher.
Oh, also, we in third grade we do have little passports that we make. And so every project is based on a different culture or a different country. And in their little passports, they write two facts that they learned about the culture, like the country if I
Wow,
chose it, or their own, or another one that they got to choose. Um, so yeah, I try to
that's
incorporate
awesome.
culture in a lot of things that we do. I
Yeah,
just want
man,
them to
that's so
be.
cool.
I want my kiddos to like realize that they're growing up in such a diverse space with a lot of diverse people. I feel like sometimes they don't, not that you want them to like point out what exactly people are and what they identify as, but I want them to realize that they're surrounded by so many different people that have so much to offer to them.
Yeah, absolutely. That's amazing. You mentioned being a new mom.
Yes.
How old's your little one again? I don't know. I asked you this
she's
last
gonna be
time.
she's gonna be 6 months tomorrow.
Oh man, are
Yeah,
you
it's like
now? Are you are you sentimental and celebrate each milestone in a big way? My wife, who you know, is very much like that.
Yes. Well, I every month I do a little like photo shoot, and we like talk about all of her milestones that she's done that month. My husband was actually texting me today and was like, "Did you plan a 6 month party for her?" And I was like, "I'm not that extra. We're not gonna have a 6 month party." But
Hey,
like,
no judgment from me.
well, like maybe we'll, I don't know, maybe we'll have a nice dinner or something, bake her a cake that she can't eat.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
that's awesome. Okay, well,
Yeah.
along those lines, being a new mom, how has that changed your perspective on, I don't know, family life and or schooling? So you mentioned, hating obviously being away from your baby 9 to 5
Hmm.
or 9 to 4, whatever. But you clearly love your job in the classroom and value it. So I don't know. I mean, it's a long ways down the road. I don't want to make you think too far ahead, but I don't know. Do you envision yourself doing anything like homeschooling, or what is your perspective on the state of how public schooling is right now? Because I know this is turning into a long question, which is what I'm kind of known for, but uh, I mean, I feel like you can read headlines nowadays, and it just seems like the world is ending as far as education goes. So, what are your thoughts on that?
I feel like I have been having an existential crisis with my job because I absolutely love my job. I love what I do. I think I have the most fun job in a school, because we literally just get to create, and I'm not focused on whether it looks good or not. As long as you're creating and there's meaning behind it, then it's a
Mm,
work of art, you know? And I think that's so fun. Um, but I also don't want to be at school because I want to be home all the time. I want to be with my little one, and I want to watch her do all those milestones,
mm-hmm.
and be with her every second of the day, you know? So going down the road, but I'm like, also. I used to think that this was going to be my forever job. I thought that I wanted to be an art teacher for the rest of my life until I retired. Um, but it is getting harder. I do have a lot of hope, um, but it's also very heavy and hard at the same time. I think
Mm,
last time we talked about how I've noticed a difference between the kids who were affected by COVID versus the kids who, not that they weren't, but they weren't in school as much as the older kids. And
right.
those older kids are really tough right now. They didn't get the social and emotional learning that they needed in those COVID years, which is one of the reasons why they can't empathize or um, share or understand each other, things like that, like very basic skills that you learn at school. And I think public school is um, very valuable in these ways. You get to learn skills that you wouldn't anywhere else, or maybe you would, but in a different way. You're filled with different diversities and adversities too, and you learn how to do all of the things. Um, but oh gosh, lost train of thought.
No, that was good. I was
um,
tracking.
but with my younger kids, oh, okay. So with my younger kids, I'm noticing that they're not as hard, right? So they can empathize with one another. They can share easily. They can socialize. They can communicate with each other. Even my kindergartners are able to say, so and so, you hurt my feelings because this hurt me
Yeah.
because. But my sixth graders can't even have that conversation. They just immediately get offensive and get on the defense because they can't communicate why something is bothering them. And
Mm,
that group, it makes it really hard to stay in education because I can't choose to just be a K through 2 or K through 3 teacher as an art teacher, an elementary art teacher. That's very rare. that there are schools that are just K through 2. Um, love those grades. They are my bread and butter. But also, I have to deal with the older kids too. And I can't just be happy for half the day and then miserable the next day or the second half of the day, right?
Mm-hmm.
So behaviors have gone, like in the 3-4 years that I've been teaching, behaviors have gone through the roof. Um, and it has made teaching a lot harder. And I don't want to undermine any other teacher, like any school or teacher who is struggling, saying that what they're saying is not valued or what they're saying is an exaggeration, because it's not. From my school and my experiences, I do feel like we're on the up and up, but I mean, I can't know that for sure. I just know that I see a difference between my K through second graders that I didn't see when my sixth graders were in that age range, right? Um, so I'm hoping and praying that behaviors get better and being a teacher gets better. Hoping and praying that we get paid more to deal with all of the things. um,
Absolutely.
but I maybe I'm just optimistic. We do have a teacher and sub shortage, and that speaks volumes for what's happening at our schools. And yeah, we have a lot of expectations, and we're dealing with a lot right now. So yeah, it's heavy. I think if anything, going back to the very beginning of your question, if anything would take me away from the classroom, it would just be like me wanting to be with my daughter and being able to teach her. I don't know if I would ever want to homeschool her. Um, we've talked about putting her in a private school for like K1 type thing. Um,
Mm-hmm.
but I did tell my husband that I do want her to be in a public school because she gets to socialize. Not that if you're homeschooling, you don't socialize your kids. I don't believe that either. I do believe that there are, when you homeschool, you have communities and your children are socialized. But I also feel like she would be able to um, become a critical and creative thinker, be able to problem solve better when she's surrounded by other individuals who think so differently than her. I think
Mm-hmm.
that is very valuable in public school.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I appreciate you sharing all that. That was, I mean, you dotted all the I's, crossed all the T's. That was very thorough.
Thank you.
Yeah, no, this is great. I appreciate you being honest about how yeah you're navigating all of it. I mean, in real time. Wait, yeah, 6 months
Yeah.
into having your little one, that's a lot to think about, and you get kind of a everyday first look at what the future is in some kind of a weird way, I guess, than a lot of people if they're not in the classroom, elementary classroom. So I'm sure this is not the first time you've thought about it.
No, it's like every day.
Okay, yeah, in the middle of those race conversations.
Yeah.
Okay, what can our listeners do? Can they do anything? Can we do anything moving forward to help any of the issues we've talked about?
I said this last time too. It sounds a little cliche, but I just want people to teach their babies how to love our babies. And it's all over
Mm,
Facebook. You always see those things that are like, teach your kids to love my kids too, or teach your kids to understand my kids too. And I just truly believe that would make a world of a difference in raising this next generation and in school. Because if our kids understood how other people thought or empathize, even just empathizing, they don't even have to completely understand. As long as they empathize and they like love on each other, then I feel like a lot of things would get fixed. I also said last time that on top of that, read to your kids. I
yeah.
do a lot of reading and reflections and writing in my classroom too, even though we're an art class. We do a lot of reflections, and reading and writing is involved in that. And I saw in those COVID grades, or kids who were like very affected in COVID, that those levels really dropped. Some of our kids don't know how to write like complete sentences. Some struggle a lot with reading, and then I don't see that gap as big. But of course, I'm only seeing them like very little with doing this, so I can't speak like as a generalization. But from what I'm seeing, like the littles don't have that big of a gap when it comes to reading and writing right now. Um, so I think the more we expose our kids to reading and writing, the more that they would love it and get better at it. So teach your babies how to love my babies and read to your kids.
That's awesome. Wow, thank you so much. This was fantastic. We killed the re-recording.
Yes, we do.
You killed it. No, this was great. Thank you so much. I mean, selfishly as a parent of little ones, as well as justice advocate, your insight to all this stuff is indispensable. Really, really great. Thank you so much. We
Wait, do we have
okay
do we have time? Do we have time for one
yeah,
question? Can I ask you a question?
go for it on the spot.
Okay. Um, I'm I'm sorry. I have been getting this a lot with my daughter, but do people ever like talk about your kid's skin color or like how they don't identify
Mm.
with one or the other? Because Caitlin is white and then you are Asian. So do you ever get that?
Yeah. So man, we should do another episode on mixed
We can talk
mixed
about this
babies.
another time.
Well,
Yeah.
John Mark on too. No, this is great. I smiled because I started laughing because my uh, it's just I'm really asking you a lot of these questions because I find it just so interesting and some of your answers that I didn't expect. But so we obviously talk about this stuff with our kids. I got 8, 5, and 1 year old, but they I haven't really heard a lot of talk from or their experiences having talked about this. They haven't shared a ton of this coming up with them of where they like identify, but we just regularly say like, so I'm kind of butchering this. We'll say when they ask questions, well, yeah, I go by Papa to them, but Papa is Asian and his skin is that's why his skin is darker or tanner than your skin. We go really basic, he's so far,
Hmm.
and Mama is Irish or a lot of people just say white, and you guys are like part of both of us. That's kind of as specific as we get right now, and they take it in a very lighthearted way so far, and I laugh
Hmm.
because they like to recount it, especially my 5-year-old little girl. She says she'll randomly bring it up and say, "Hey,
Oh.
I'm Asian. Papa's Asian. Ollie's Asian. Everett's Asian." And then there'll be like a pause, and she'll be like, "Yeah, that's great. Good job, Millie." And then she'll say, "And Mama's Asian." And then we just laugh because we're like, almost. Or like we'll say, "Oh, she almost got it." So I think
Aw.
so. I take that as she's saying it in a positive voice. So like she likes that she's Asian because I feel like we've obviously said it in a positive way, but it's just funny to hear
Hmm.
her identify and then just she it's always last and there's always a pause and she says, "And Mama's Asian. We're all Asian." It's just it's funny. Yeah,
Do
I'm
people
interested as they do get older though. How they'll identify, but then the kind of things they'll experience. I can assume certain things they'll experience, but they, if you don't know what my kids look like, I know you do, but listeners,
Mhm.
their skin is pretty light, and so I think a lot of times they'll be white passing.
Yeah.
That it could always change or not be true, but I don't. Yeah, they haven't, and I asked probably more than they would like. They haven't brought up a ton of instances where they talked about it a lot with other kids.
I ask because obviously my baby is only 6 months. Like she's pretty pale. I mean, she's a
Mm-hmm.
baby. But people have already started saying things like, your baby is so white, or she doesn't look very
Mm,
Asian, And I've had to stop a couple people and say, like, politely, like, please don't say that because it's going to confuse her. If you say that
yeah.
she doesn't look Asian enough, she's not going to feel like she belongs. Or if you're going to
Mm-hmm.
say she looks white and isn't Asian, but she knows she is, you're going to confuse her. And so I was curious, like, have people like said that to you, or if you've heard anything with like through your kids, or how you dealt with that? But like, I love your answer. That was my one question.
Yeah, no, that's a great question. We've had I think early on, this is probably like 3 or 4 years ago now, but an adult friend or acquaintance say something. I think we were talking about food, like what foods our kids were liking and eating at whatever stage. And uh our 8-year-old Ollie has always loved rice. And so we were just kind of off the cuff talking about like what they like. And we're like, oh, Ollie, I mean, he inhales rice, like he loves it. And as you can imagine, like the person was like, oh, of
Of
course,
course she
like
does.
they
Yeah.
he would, he's Asian, or like a little Asian kid or something like that. And so I actually think it was Caitlin that was experiencing it, but took that time to say actually, and like unpacked what was problematic about that dismissive
Hmm.
remark and tone. Um, I don't. I probably have less experience to say about some of this, and sometimes I wonder if like I think sometimes I don't experience this quite as much because a lot of my feelings on this stuff are out there sort of, and
Yeah.
I'm kind of upfront about this a little bit. And uh I don't know, I sometimes I think people don't purposely say stuff out loud to me, which is a blessing and a
Like,
curse. I mean, I like talking about this stuff. I don't want to give off the impression that I don't want somebody to cross me with the remark, but also sometimes I'm like, okay, good, like no one's gonna say something like
oh, he's the
like
guy
this to
with
me.
the podcast. He talks about race all the time. I'm not gonna say it to him.
Right. I live in a small town, and so who knows, sometimes
Yeah.
I'm like, do people, I wonder if people just would never. Yeah, yeah, I don't know. I try and just prepare our kids to embrace whatever. But I come back to
That's
just the
awesome.
stuff you're saying you experience in your classroom, and I think that my kids are still in the stage of rose-colored glasses. Of they'll learn like what they learn in school, like history lessons and stuff, but they don't like Black History Month. They retain all the big talking points and figures that they learn about, but then literally they'll just say that's really stupid that Black people used to not have rights because they're Black.
Yeah.
And I'm like, yeah, that's the time where I'm like, yeah, you can say that's stupid. They love that we let them say stupid, but they're like, that's stupid. And then I'm like, yeah, yep, it's
It
stupid.
is.
Like that. If that's what
Yeah.
you're taking from it, that's fine for now. um,
That's
yeah, no, that's a great
cool.
question though. Yeah.
Well, thank you.
Oh yeah, absolutely, no problem. Um, Thank you for coming on and doing this episode and re-recording this episode. Again, excellent listeners. I know you're going to take a lot from this. Thank you guys for listening. As always, the music you're listening to is done by our guy Dylan Dent. Our artwork was created by Ashley Bush, and we'll see you guys next time. Thank you.